There is this thought in Platonist tradition that the truth is subordinate. The truth is for the sake of the good. Now this is an idea that I wish I had learned when I was younger. I don't know why they don't teach it to people. It's a very common philosophical mistake, I think, among moral relativists and atheists, that they can kind of reach that conclusion on their own if you prompt them. It doesn't take long, but it never really factors into their ideology. Now, there is this Platonic dialogue called Gorgias, where Socrates talks to a rhetorician, a sophist, a politician by the name of Gorgias. And one of the most important concepts that I got out of that narrative was that everyone pursues the good. No one willingly tries to go after evil. And you know, there are many people who, you know, if you told that to them, they wouldn't think anything of it really. It wouldn't be surprising. But you'd be surprised by how many people don't actually live out that philosophy. And I'm decently convinced by it. But the reason why I want to make this video today is because I just begged the question: what is evil? What is the nature of evil? And for that, I'm going to start way back. One of the earliest monotheistic religions, Zoroastrianism, it posits that there are two entities. You have Ahura Mazda, who is this maximally great benevolent being, very much akin to the Christian God. And you have Ahriman, who is the maximally evil being. Now, unlike the Christian dualism, where ultimately Satan is subordinate to God in the sense that, well, God is omnipotent, but also Satan's origin, his genesis, his creation, is contingent on God. God is more primary than Satan. And this kind of introduces its own set of philosophical questions as to, it's like the problem of evil. Why does God allow evil to exist? And that gives Christianity a very mystic quality that I appreciate. But before we can even ask that question, we would have to ask what evil is in the first place. Now, unlike Christianity, Zoroastrianism posits these two entities, Ahura Mazda and Ahriman, as temporally equal, as neither one is more primary or, I guess, the cause of the other. Now, it's very interesting because in Zoroastrianism, in some of their texts, you get these descriptions of Ahriman as being, well, Ahura Mazda, the maximally great being. He's the ruler of heaven. He is command over the host of angels and reality, in opposition to Ahriman, who rules over hell, who rules over demons, and the key word here is non-reality. In similar fashion, there was this quote where it's like, Ahriman never was and never will be, which is a very strange idea, where it's like evil in this sense, in the Zoroastrianism, in their framework, is not a thing in and of itself. It is, you know, evil is kind of this non-being. It is a sense of ephemerality, of fading away. Now, I guess to provide some context or some opposing thought, in religions such as Gnosticism or in the philosophy of Neoplatonism, you get this contrasting theory of evil where, for example, in Gnosticism, they posit that the demiurgos, the craftsman, the demiurge, who fashioned the world, otherwise the God of the Old Testament, is actually not the one true God. That God is inferior to a higher being, and our material world is modeled after this Platonic world of the forms, the Platonic world of ideas and ideals. And, you know, for like the Neoplatonist Plotinus, he considered, for him, the primary quality of substance and matter was evil. That was the primary condition of the material, was that it was evil and that it was lesser. Now, I guess you can contrast that. You have the Platonists working on that side. And there's also, in the Platonic dialogue, you can see the roots of this in Plato's dialogue Phaedo, which is the very last dialogue before Socrates is executed. Socrates is talking about philosophy is simply training you how to die. Philosophy is the art of kind of social distancing yourself from life in and of itself. And he talks about, you know, every empirical sensation, every pleasure, those are things which rivet your soul to your body, and they keep you from accessing the pure and clean world of ideas, which is only, you know, accessible through the spirit or the rational mind. And, you know, in some sense, I actually have a lot of sympathy for that line of thinking. And you can kind of walk about and notice yourself how many hedonists are more or less that they're caught up in living in the now, but because of that, they're haunted by the past. They're possessed by ghosts. In an Aristotelian sense, you could say they're soulless, or that the undead really do walk the earth. And speaking of Aristotle, interestingly enough, he didn't really have his own conception, or I guess, no, that's not true. He didn't have a very direct articulation for the theory of evil, the nature of evil. And he goes about, his primary concern is he wants to know what it's like to live a good life. And for him, that's enough. He doesn't need to... Now, I could be missing out. I've read quite a bit of Aristotle. I could be missing some text where he kind of sets out to define evil and its nature. But as far as I know, he's like, okay, I know what the good life is. That's good enough. I'll stop there. And, you know, you can kind of fill in the blanks in terms of what evil is there. But we do get quite a bit to work with, and if you can recall my previous video where I was talking about thinking of the world in terms of potentialities and actualities, in line with that line of thinking, your potentialities are determined by your nature, the things that you are capable of doing. And for Aristotle, he thought he granted a moral hierarchy to the different capacities of organisms, or at least he set that out for humans. And at the most basic, you have the nutritive soul. It's the most basic, the primary idea of life itself. Its growth, its incorporation of external material to generate new internal material for the organism. It's sex, and you know, in that manner, sex is ranked low as I guess a moral pursuit. It's not necessarily evil, but if you climb up the next ladder, you have the perceptive soul. You have animals who use sensation to navigate and exist in the world. And then at the very top, you have the contemplative soul. And you can kind of see that that essence belongs to man primarily. And the actualization of using your contemplative soul is the highest good. Now, for the theologian St. Augustine of Hippo, who lived decently later, I think somewhere between 300 to 400 AD, I could be wrong about that, in North Africa during the Roman Empire. He would notice that Aristotle's silence in terms of a theory of evil is not necessarily the absence of an argument. And he would kind of extrapolate from that this idea that evil is simply the privation of, it is the absence of good. And I guess you could think of this in terms of an analogy, where it's like, okay, the forces of light and the forces of darkness. It is very clear, intuitively, at least for me, my knee-jerk reaction is to assign goodness to light. In like manner, in terms of thinking of good as the privation, evil as the privation of good, there's no such thing as a flash dark. You can have a flashlight which illuminates, darkness, because light is a thing. But darkness itself, it's nothing. You can't, it's the absence of a presence. And likewise, good requires activity, it requires energy, intent, effort to sustain. And for St. Augustine, it was the order of God, the order which God imposed upon the world, that brings the light out of the darkness. Now, I'm going to think of it in terms of this way, then, because here's another way to think about it. If that's the case, Ahriman, then, even though he's not a thing, we could say poetically that he is the shape of the whole in man's heart, even though evil can't be said to have substance, or can't be said to be a force, it can still be defined in terms of its absence, in terms of its non-being or its ephemerality.